everyone. Welcome back to the Let's Talk podcast with me and David. And today we're going to be talking about Ghostbusters 2 from 1989. And, don't change the channel. We didn't do the original Ghostbusters. We had a reason for doing Ghostbusters 2 today. And what was that reason, David?
Well, this is one of my unofficial New Year's Eve films that I try and watch around this time of year. So it's a new year, and why not start it with a film that is actually based around New Year's?
I agree. There aren't too many New Year's films. Like, I always try and go through them. There's this, When Harry Met Sally has a New Year's scene, Forrest Gump has a New Year's scene. But this one, for the most part, it takes place on New Year's Day, New Year's Eve leading into New Year's Day at the very end of this movie. And yeah, it's definitely one. I checked it out this year around New Year's. This one again is directed by Ivan Reitman. It's written again by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis. We bring them all back. We bring back Bill Murray and what's the guy who plays Winston? Ernie Hudson?
Ernie Hudson.
So we bring everybody back. Rick Moranis, Sigourney Weaver. And this movie came out in the summer of 1989 with Batman, The Last Crusade. So what a summer of 89. But for you, David, I'm curious, how did you feel about this when it came out?
I was just going to say about New Year's, a couple of other films. Godfather Part 2, Jaws the Revenge.
Oh, yeah. I knew you have to bring up that.
Which is another movie I watch around that time of year.
Another sequel we absolutely needed.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, first off, just because you touched on it there, what a summer for movies. Lethal Weapon 2,
yep.
Back to the Future 2, as you say, Last Crusade, unbelievable summer for sequels. And of course, our beloved Batman's in there. So, I mean, Ghostbusters 2 was really up against it in the summer, but it climaxes up to New Year's Eve. And it could be a Christmas film because you see Christmas trees in it. Santa's in it at one stage. So it's brilliant that way. But how did I feel when I first seen this, John? This is one of these movies that I actually grew up watching. So I can't remember the first time I actually seen it. I just really enjoy Ghostbusters 2. I mean, it's one of those sequels that I would put up there with my favourite sequels. I would be up there with, not saying it's as good as Aliens, but it's up there with my favourite sequels. Aliens, Jaws 2, Back to the Future 2, Temple of Doom. I just really enjoyed Ghostbusters 2 from start to finish.
Yeah, I like Ghostbusters 2, but I still think it's a pretty big quality drop from the original Ghostbusters. I'm a little bit younger than you, and I saw Ghostbusters, the original one. I remember renting it from the library in 1996, I want to say. And then I saw Ghostbusters 2, and the thing about Ghostbusters 2 when you're younger, it's definitely a better movie because I feel like they were definitely leading into it being more of a family-friendly movie, right from the fact that no one smokes in this movie in comparison to the first one. In the first movie, Dan Aykroyd's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth the entire film. But in this movie, they're kind of becoming more family-friendly, and it just doesn't entirely work for me, the whole movie. At points, it just becomes too silly. And Bill Murray, I feel like the entire time, all his lines of dialogue are just, quips and jokes. And even though, he's supposed to have this great relationship with Sigourney Weaver, I'm not feeling it throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, well, the whole tone of the movie is more playful, and the reason being is, from what I'm led to believe, is because of the cartoon series which came out in between the first movie and the second movie, and you could say that they left from the first one to the second one. They left it too long between movies. I think that was because Bill Murray didn't want to come back and do a sequel. They eventually talked him into it. I think the demand was too much from the fans that they wanted a sequel. The cartoon was very popular, and if you even look at their appearance in this movie, their appearance as well of the Ghostbusters is a wee bit more clean cut, even down to their hairstyles. It looks as if they were trying to style the characters on what they look like in the cartoon. So I do think that it was lightened up for a younger audience. Even the ghosts as well. A lot of the ghosts, what did you call the brothers in the courtroom again?
Oh my God, the Scoleri brothers!
Actually, it's funny you brought them up because I felt like those ghosts and that set piece was actually something that felt like it was left over from the first movie because it reminded me a lot of the opening ghosts in the library from the first movie. I actually really like those two ghosts.
Yeah, but when you actually look at them, but when you look at the ghost in the first movie, in the library, she's genuinely creepy looking. She looks like an older person who has actually passed away because it's translucent or whatever, you know. But whereas these guys here are very cartoonish, they're bloated. You know, one's a slim version, they've got big eyes, and the other one's like a chubby person. They're supposed to be brothers that the judge give the chair to, the electric chair, and that's why there's electricity coming out of them. But they're a wee bit more cartoonish looking. But as you were saying there about you feel as if it's something that was left over from the first movie. The biggest problem that I have with Ghostbusters 2, as much as I enjoy this movie, I appreciate it, and I do to a certain extent, I love the movie. I mean, I never feel bored watching it. The biggest problem that I actually have with it is that it's too familiar. They hit all the exact same beats as the first movie, and that's the biggest problem I have with this. For example, the courtroom scene is just akin to the hotel scene in the first movie when they caught Slimer.
Yeah, it's very, very similar. Very, very laid out the very same way. The judge is just replacing the guy who's like all snooty and everything in the first one. But the judge in this movie is obviously they're Ghostbusters, so we're supposed to defy a lot of beliefs going into these movies. But that guy is such a terrible judge, and the way he's just going after the Ghostbusters, you know, I find it a little, and I know that was intentional. Dan Aykroyd said he wanted to make the Ghostbusters not be famous and have everyone hate them now, and that was on purpose. But it just feels so weird that they saved the entire city, and now they're essentially villains because they cost the city a lot of money. And I get that another big theme of the movie is the fact that everybody in the city is an asshole, and that's why they created this big pink slime, because just no one's a good person, and we're supposed to, you know, be nice to each other, and this won't happen kind of deal. But still, that it just felt like that was just too over the top, if that makes sense.
Yeah, look, I say, but you grow up with something for so long that you just accept it after a while, and then when you actually sit down and analyze it, you go to yourself, could there have been a better way of things to go? And there's things that deep down do kind of niggle me, is kind of like the fact of that, yes, the Ghostbusters are no longer heroes and they're vilified, and I just felt as if they could have went in a different direction. I mean, could they just went out of business because there was no ghosts after the destroyed Gozer? You know, there's no ghosts to catch anymore, so you go out of business that way. And as I said about this, the same old familiar beats that they hit, even when they catch the two ghosts in the courthouse, to go straight into a montage.
Yes,
you know, of the Ghostbusters, just like yeah, exactly, just like they did in the first one. It's the same at the end when they get locked up in the mental asylum. Instead of a mental asylum in the first movie, they get locked up in a jail, but they go into a song when all the ghosts are arriving to New York. The song in the first movie, I can't remember the name of the song, but then they go into another different type of song called Flip City in Ghostbusters 2 when the Titanic arrives, which I really love that shot when the Titanic's sitting there and all the ghosts are coming up onto the dock.
Yeah, I've been hard on this movie a little bit, but I just want to be clear. I also really like this movie, and I also really like that scene with the Titanic showing up. And I love the line the one guy says. He's like, "Better late than never."
Yeah, it's just what he says. I've got a guy down at the dock. He says the Titanic's just arrived, and then it's like it just shows you it, and then you see them looking and going, better late than never. But yeah, so it's got some quality moments, but that's what if I could just say the biggest flaw is it's the same beats. So the Ghostbusters, they have to build the business up again. They're disliked just like in the first movie at the start. You know what I mean? They're back in business, and then there's Dana and Peter Venkman's relationship where she detests him at the start, and then they get together as the film goes on. So it is very, very familiar. And instead of Rick Moranis being the possessed comedic character in the first movie, we now have Jonas, who is the possessed character who has a crush on Dana, just like Rick Moranis did in the first movie. So that's my biggest problem with this movie is the same beats and it's too familiar.
Yeah, no, that does bother me as well. And he just feels like a step down for Rick Moranis, but they all knew that Rick Moranis did such a good job in the first movie that they had to bring him back for the second.
Yes.
But they shoehorned him in, like they made him their lawyer now. He was never a lawyer involved in law in the first one at all. And then he kind of feels like, yeah, he was always kind of a doofus in a way, like he was a little goofy, but they make him feel like almost stupid in this one at points, and it kind of bothered me how they went with his character, because I love Rick Moranis. This came out actually the same year as another movie he did called Parenthood. He's just a fantastic actor. I just felt like they wanted him in the movie, but they didn't give him enough.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same with Dana as well.
Yeah.
She's there as the focal point of her child. The Vigo, the Carpathian, is after her child because he needs a body to come back into the new century coming along, the 21st century. And that's why she's there. I mean, what else does she do?
Yeah,
She doesn't do much else. Even at the end when she goes to rescue the baby, the Ghostbusters come in and save them all. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, no, it's just that it has those moments where it just does, like you're saying, like it just feels very similar, and they just wanted to get the people back. Like she does have basically the same arc, and I know that Bill Murray was apparently the one who shot this down. Was they were supposed to be married and have the kid, but Bill Murray felt like, that wouldn't work because that doesn't fit, I guess, Bill Murray's character. But they just kind of end up falling into that anyway, so it would have just made sense then having to write around the fact that you didn't want that to happen. We have to say, oh, she got married, divorced, and now this is his son. He's nowhere in the picture. Let's just rekindle our marriage. It would have just been made more sense if they would have just stayed married.
Exactly. That's why I just feel as if there's no kind of progression from the characters in this movie from the first. It's like they went back. And another character was just sprung to mind there, John. Walter Peck from the first movie, who was from
Die Hard.
What do you call yes, he was in Die Hard, but he also what was he from in the first movie again, where he tried to shut them down?
Oh, he was from City Hall, right? Like, and then
it was a environmental agency.
Oh yeah, something like that. And then he's the one who lets all the ghosts out because he doesn't believe that.
Whereas this one, you have the Murs, right hand man, his lackey, instead, who got them locked up as well in the mental institute. So you've got him as opposed to Walter Peck as well. So there's another character. But I don't want to sound I just don't want to sound like I'm hating on this. I don't. I adore this movie. But if there's a big flaw for me, that's what the flaw is. But I accept it for what it is, and I really enjoy it. And it's definitely up there as one of my favorite sequels.
Now that we've talked a lot about the negatives, there is a couple positives that I want to talk about. Like right off the gate, the guy who shot this movie was Martin Scorsese's usual DP, Michael Chapman, which is an upgrade from the previous film. And honestly, I think that this movie looks fantastic all the way through. Special effects, which were done by Industrial Light and Magic. Like, I have the Blu-rays right there. And the first Blu-ray, it's pretty rough looking. But then when you put the second Blu-ray in, I haven't upgraded them to 4K, it's a noticeable jump in quality. And I have to believe, A, it's 5 years in the future, but B, I think because Michael Chapman, who was one of the best DPs ever, shot this movie. And I think it really adds to how good it looks.
100%. I agree with you. I was the exact same when I bought that Blu-ray and I put the first movie in, and how grainy it was. And I understand there's a natural grain in film, especially when people are transferring older movies over to a HD format. You want to see some of that grain, but I do agree the first movie didn't look great, and the second movie looks brilliant. That is one thing. I mean, this movie's 35 years old this year. That's one thing about this movie. I think that it really does hold up well. Just how it looks and the special effects. I think the special effects this movie hold up better than the first movie. And another thing about it too, as well, as I say, want to be the positives about it is I genuinely think the jokes are brilliant in this film. I love the one-liners. There's not a scene that doesn't go past in this movie that I actually laugh out loud at.
It's hysterical. And Bill Murray, like the first time we get introduced to him and he has that talk show, the stuff he's doing and just basically this sarcasm towards these people is hysterical. And the one girl says, I predict February 14th, 2016. And he's like,
Valentine's Day. Bummer.
All that stuff.
But even the other guy who's like, he actually predicts that he's like, he's predicts it right, but it's going to end on New Year's Eve this year. And he's like, you don't have time to get the book, the paperback published, or the movie rights. And he's like, no, he's like, I've got a psychic connection that it is going to... It's just their faces. It's very funny. But even like you were saying about Rick Moranis about them becoming a lawyer, and when they're in the court, he says, "Guys, I think you're making a big mistake." He says, "I only got my law degree in night school," and Ray says to him,
"Well, that's fine, Lewis. We got arrested at night."
Yeah, I love that line. It's perfect. But then the one-liners are perfect.
They're brilliant. I mean, another great scene as well. Which every scene's great to me. But when Sigourney Weaver goes to see Egon and she asks him about Peter, he says, "Well, he was borderline for a while, but then he crossed the border." But she's kind of like got his back to Egon, and she said, "Does he ever mention me?" And he says, "He's got the PK meter out, and he's kind of putting it on her." Remember? And then he says no, and then before she turns around, you see him just kind of looking at it and going.
Yeah, Harold Ramis was definitely a little bit more. They gave him a little bit more jokes. He's a little less serious in this one.
When I was a kid, and I'm sure it was the same with a lot of children who've seen Ghostbusters, everybody loved Peter Venkman, and he was the focal point. And I listen, I take nothing away from Bill Murray. He's a comic genius, but the older I've gotten now, I mean, I love Egon and I love Ray. They're my two favorites.
Bill Murray would probably be my like top 5 or 6 actors of all time. I just love his sarcasm and his like sense of humor. It just works so well for me. I wouldn't pick I wouldn't say that like in the Ghostbusters movies that Bill Murray's my favorite character or like that's Bill Murray's best movies. I still think that Groundhog Day is Bill Murray's best movie, but I do think that Harold Ramis is definitely the glue that holds this all together. He wrote the movie, and I always felt like even behind the scenes, he always just kind of felt like that nice guy that, because, you know, the way it's always said is that Bill Murray can be an asshole. You know, Dan Aykroyd, everyone usually says he's pretty cool, but everyone says that Harold Ramis was just like a sweetheart of a guy. And you kind of can see that in the movies.
Yeah, I think, look, I'm only speculating here. Over the years, you know, there was talk of a proper Ghostbusters 3. It might be controversial to say it, but what I mean is in the 90s, there was talk of them wanting to do a third one. And I know that Dan Aykroyd had an idea of the Ghostbusters going to hell. And the reason they couldn't get it off the ground was because Bill Murray just wasn't interested. And I find it bizarre that all these years later, after Harold Ramis has passed away, that he goes and does a cameo in the 2016 Ghostbusters, and then he was happy to show up for Afterlife, and he's in this new one coming out this year. I know that they didn't get on during Groundhog Day. It's well publicised. They had big bust-ups on Groundhog Day. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I do. I love Harold Ramis. He directed Vacation. Vacation to me is one of my favourite comedies.
Yellow. I'm okay.
And I love him as Egon Spangler in Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2. I think his subtle humor is just so hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. He does a lot with his eyes. He seems like a little bit lighthearted. And even like as he got later in his life, he would pop up in other movies. Like there's a Jack Black, Colin Hanks movie from the early 2000s I used to watch a lot called Orange County, and he pops up in there. They accidentally like drug him, and he's really funny. And
yeah,
you know what happened with Groundhog Day was Bill Murray was going through a divorce, I think, and he just bullied Harold Ramis, and essentially they didn't make up until Harold Ramis was on his deathbed.
Yeah, so that's right. I think I read that. Yeah,
maybe that opened the door for him to like come back to the Ghostbusters movies. I don't know, but I remember just like you, I remember even like as far back as like 2007, them also saying like they were gonna still do Ghostbusters 3, and then it all kind of fell apart until we eventually got to that remake in 2016. And then I think you've told me you're not a big fan of Afterlife, right?
No, didn't like it at all. I watched it in the cinema. I brought my daughter. My daughter likes the Ghostbusters movies, and I brought her to see it, and I just wasn't impressed. I just felt as if it was so far away from what a Ghostbusters movie should be and is. I just didn't enjoy it. And I know we had been talking when we were saying about doing Ghostbusters 2, you'd said you hadn't seen it since yourself. It's not one that I would like to revisit. Maybe controversial for some people that really enjoy that movie for me to say that, but I have my reasons. I just feel as if Ghostbusters 1, 2 as well, to a certain extent. The first one's a horror comedy. It has adult actors in it. It has adult humour in it. There was a lot of teen comedies come out in around that time, which were for teenagers and younger people. I'm not saying younger people wouldn't enjoy Ghostbusters, especially teenagers. I mean, I was very young when I first seen Ghostbusters, and I've always liked Ghostbusters. But to me, it was a film that adults could sit down and enjoy, and I can sit down now as an adult and enjoy a Ghostbusters movie. But Afterlife, to me, was just purely a kid's movie, and that's why I just couldn't relate to it at all. I just didn't think it was that funny either.
No, I get that. I mean, I remember liking it when I saw it in theaters, and I did actually laugh at the little mini marshmallows lighting each other on fire. I'm not gonna lie. I guess I'm a child at heart. That did actually make me laugh a good amount of times. And it's Jason Reitman, who's Ivan Reitman's son, who directed that. And I did kind of like at the end, you know, them bringing back, you know, Harold Ramis as a ghost and everything like that.
Yes,
I remember liking
I like that.
I liked it in the movies, but it's weird. I feel no pull to go back and rewatch it. Like, I haven't wanted to. I'm like, maybe it was just like, hey, you're in the movies, you enjoyed this enough. And it had enough callbacks to the original, like just, you know, seeing Echo one more time was cool, I guess, on the big screen. Yeah, it's nothing in comparison to the first two Ghostbusters, and I only saw the 2016 one once as well. Didn't really care for it.
Yeah, I haven't seen the 2016 one. It's just something. Just when I seen the trailer, it just didn't appeal to me. You know what I mean? Somebody like me who was born in the early '80s, grew up watching Ghostbusters 2. The last thing I wanted was a reboot. It didn't matter who was in it. It could have been another four men. I probably wouldn't have watched it, John. To be honest with you, it's like the RoboCop reboot.
You're coming with me.
I watched that, didn't like it. If I'm gonna watch RoboCop, I watch the original RoboCop. Gonna watch Ghostbusters, I watch the original Ghostbusters. You know, it's funny. I was listening to the Goonies panel from 4 years ago yesterday. They were asked about would they like a reboot. Sean Astin, I don't know how to say the rest of his name.
Pee-wee Kwan.
And there was Corey Feldman, and they were asked in this era of reboots, would you like a reboot of the Goonies where you have a cameo, or would you like a sequel? And Corey Feldman stepped right in right away and just says, look, I think I know Sean's answer. He says, but I'm just going to give you mine. He says, I'm not a fan of reboots. He says, I think if they're going to do another one, they have to have a sequel. And he says, and because I want to carry on those characters. He says, I know myself, if I see a sequel, I want to see those characters again in the sequel. And he's right. You know, somebody like me who's the biggest fans of Ghostbusters, John, are from the 80s and the 90s, and they want to see, and it doesn't mean that I want to see the likes of Bill Murray and Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd, 70-year-old men running about with proton packs on their backs. It just means that I always had this idea, and I said it about the first Ghostbusters, because in the first movie when Bill Murray talks Ray into remortgaging his house for the money to start the business, he actually says to Ray, think of the franchise rates alone, it's going to make you rich. They had an opportunity to turn Ghostbusters, and I'm not talking about the movies, within the world of the movies into a franchise. You could have had Ghostbusters in California. You could have had Ghostbusters in London. You could have had Ghostbusters in Paris. And that could have been the anchor for your sequel. And of course, you have the older Ghostbusters there, maybe in higher positions, running the company, doing the training, and all the rest. They didn't have to be out there with the proton packs on, fighting ghosts. I mean, Rick Moranis, and that's the thing that boggled my mind in that Afterlife, was that the fact that how could these kids carry these proton packs about? Even Rick Moranis comes running out of the firehouse in Ghostbusters 2, and the first things he says is, boy, this equipment's heavy.
Yeah, I mean, they've always kind of made reference to like those proton packs being heavy and like dangerous. Like even in this one, they're like, you can't have one. The proton packs aren't toys, like they said to one of the kids. And then in this movie, it's a bunch of kids running around with proton packs. I can understand why somebody would be frustrated by that.
Yeah, look, it's a fantasy world, and it is a fantasy movie. But one thing that I actually enjoyed about Ghostbusters, I think that a lot of people enjoyed about Ghostbusters was that they were supposed to be like working class, you know, blue collar guys. They were like firemen, right?
Yeah,
they were
exactly.
like firemen. There's a fire in your house to call the fire brigade to come put it out. There's a ghost in your house to call the Ghostbusters to come and catch it. That's why I thought that the fact of the kids running about catching ghosts was ridiculous to me as an adult.
You're 100. You see, you just kind of made me think of something. You're 100% right, because it's like they're making them like heroes, but really they're not heroes. They're just regular Joes living in New York City doing a job like the power company, like the electric company, like the water company. They're just one of those companies that's why nobody respects them. That's why they that's the whole reason. Like people cheer for them at the end of both movies because they saved the day. But other than that, they're getting treated pretty awfully by everybody.
Yeah, and they have their skeptics, and they look like shit. You know, they're covered in the goo and their hair's all over the place. Like you say, especially the first movie, they're smoking, they're up all night. They're doing shift work as well. If you notice in the first movie, they're doing shift work. They're working in twos. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be explained, but you notice it because you see Ray and Winston doing the nights. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah. So, even though it's a fantasy movie about ghosts, and that's another debate if you believe in the supernatural or you believe in ghosts, but at the same time too, there was that kind of gritty believability about it that these are a bunch of guys out there doing a job and helping people, and I just couldn't get my head around the direction they went with Afterlife. So I don't know, but it doesn't. Don't get me wrong. Not one of these people is going to say it ruined my childhood. You know, it doesn't take the shine off, or it doesn't take away from the fact that I still love the first two movies, because it's like Terminator 1 and 2. It's like Alien and Aliens. The other movies don't take away from the fact that that the first two movies are excellent.
Oh yeah, 100%. Actually, and that's always been my case. Like, I've never been one that's like totally against remakes. I'm like, if you want to remake it, that's fine. I'm just don't expect me to go see it. That's the only thing. Like, everyone, if you love a remake and you go see it and you enjoy it, happy for you. Don't expect me to go see it, because like, if you like the RoboCop remake, good for you. I despise that movie, and I love Michael Keaton's in that movie. Like, you know, there's a lot of stuff. Same thing with Total Recall.
Gary Oldman.
Yeah, Gary Oldman's in that. Total Recall, they remade that. I love Colin Farrell. I love that guy. He's a great actor. But you know what? That movie now went from being a great sci-fi horror action film to a generic, plain-looking, boring movie. So I don't like it. Like, I'm sorry, but if you like it, cool for you, but it's just never going to be for me. And I understand that. People have to understand that with Afterlife. Just because you don't like a movie, you know, you can keep remaking them. It's just don't expect everyone to enjoy them or knock them for what they really are.
Exactly. I was just going to say that it's like a lot of threes in franchises, and they keep going on and go on and go on. You know, it doesn't mean that if you say you don't like them, that you should be, you know what I mean, hated over it. Crucified. I mean, Terminator 3, you know, Terminator Salvation. There's people, I know you're big, and I'm just not bringing it up because you love that franchise, by the way. Just came to mind there.
Well, I only like, I know that Terminator 1 and 2 are the only good ones in the franchise that are great. But yes, I do like 3, Salvation, and I did like Dark Fate. Genesis is the only one that I consider like a travesty, because they actually included scenes from Terminator 1 in there, and you just don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. And then they tried to overrate it. You know, rewrite the history of it, and that's the worst thing you can do, is try to rewrite the history of a beloved movie or franchise.
Did you see Dark Fate by chance?
I've seen Genesis. That's the last one I've seen. So I've seen 3. I don't mind 3, to be honest. I actually think Salvation and Genesis made 3 look better.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So 3, I was lukewarm on. I was kind of like, oh, it's all right, but I didn't see the point in it. Well, after I watched it, I was so excited when it first came out. I watched it and kind of, I was done with it, and then my nephew wanted to see Salvation, so I brought him to the cinema to see it, and I just was like, again, I was like, nah. And then one night, I caught Genesis on television, and absolutely hated it, so I didn't go near Dark Fate, John.
Yeah, Dark Fate, I don't know if you want me to spoil the beginning for you, that movie.
I don't know, go ahead.
So, to retcon that, in the beginning of that movie, you have a young John Connor from Terminator 2. And Sarah Connor, they're in a resort, and then a T-800 shows up who looks just like Arnold from Terminator 2. This is probably like 6 months after the events of Terminator 2. Shoots John Connor in the face and kills him immediately. That's how they start that movie off. So basically saying that Terminator 2 was pointless. That's what they basically just said.
I mean, and that's like the start of Alien 3, where they kill off Newt and Hicks.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, you know, well, everything that Sigourney Weaver done at the end of that movie was for nothing. I mean, one of the most likable, I'm talking about like even Hicks, one of the most likable characters in Aliens, all of a sudden he's just not there anymore, and then you kill off the child as well. So, yeah, sometimes the mind boggles. Sometimes to me, some of these decisions that Hollywood make and the writers make, it's like, I don't understand it, because I just think that the answer to some of these franchises for continuing it is so simple, and I don't understand why nobody can see that.
I always just assume it's literally like people looking at spreadsheets that are making the final decisions, and like maybe they talk to like 1 or 2 people who just have absolutely no clue, because that's the only thing that makes sense. Because some of these, like you said, some of these decisions are just mind-boggling that they make. How do you think people are going to feel about that? When, like, especially with Aliens 3, that's like a huge one. Like, as a child, and you know, you basically now we have to deal with that grief again. And we saw in Aliens how she felt about the grief with her daughter. Like, are they trying to repeat Aliens? Is that the whole point? I don't understand. But again, like Hicks, people love Hicks. You just kill him off screen, no less, and pretend like he didn't exist. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, the thing is, I know we're moving off topic here. I think the thing is with Alien 3 was that Fincher wanted to bring it back to Alien. So he wanted it just to be her, and he wanted the atmosphere to feel like Alien, and take it away from not take it away, but go away from the direction which Cameron went, which was basically an action movie or an action thriller or action horror. And he could only do that if he killed them 2 off. But listen, to me, it was a big mistake. Great. And it's kind of like Salvation. It's like what I always say about Terminator. To me, it ended at Terminator 2. However, if they were going to do another one, and I'm not the only person to say this, probably wasn't the first person to think it, they should have just done a future war movie, and it had to look and feel like the war scenes which you've seen in T2. and T1. I don't know if that was maybe too expensive to do, but if you watch the first Terminator, John, Kyle Reese tells you everything that you need to know about the future. Everything's laid out for you. The 600 series had rubber skin. We could spot them a mile off. Then why would the 8 foot tall in Salvation for? I mean, I would spot an 8 foot tall man or an 8 foot tall robot before I'd spot a rubber robot.
And Salvation, not only that, but we very rarely see them with skin on. And on top of that, in the first two Terminator movies, we mostly see the wars at night because they can't move in the daytime. They make sure to bring that up. The whole movie takes place in the daytime on just sand-colored. Everything is washed out with greens, beiges, and browns. It's like, when I think of Terminator, I'm not thinking of that at all. I need neon colors. I need some purple and blue bullet shot. Yeah, cold. Like, this is the opposite of what I thought of Terminator.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's why I'm all for artistic choices. I'm all for putting your own stamp on things. But people want to go and see familiarity. That's the thing about sequels. It's like what James Cameron done with Aliens. He still put his own stamp on it, but he expanded the universe and expanded the lore. He didn't, some people actually did think he ruined the first one. That's a different conversation, or the lore of the first one. But he done it in a way that it wouldn't ruin your enjoyment of the first movie. That's what, to me, to go a completely different direction doesn't make any sense.
And just get back onto the Ghostbusters 2 track here. Yep. There was a line I wanted to bring up because you were talking about the Ghostbusters being working class, blue collars guys. It is funny that at one point Dan Aykroyd turns to them and he's like, "Come on, guys, suck in your guts. We're the Ghostbusters."
Suck in your guts, we're the Ghostbusters. And that's the scene when they go to the museum. And I love when Janosch comes over and says, "Oh, out." And he says, Peter Venkman says, "You know what? We had a call. There was a major creep in the area, and when we looked it up, this address came up." But you're saying about the working class guys as well, when they actually go and see the mirror later in the movie, another amazing scene, and they're all wearing their onesies.
Yeah.
And he walks in and he says, "What is this, a slumber party?" And Dan Aykroyd says, "Mr. Mirror, we just want you to know that almost 50% of us voted for you in the last election." Almost 50%. So in other words, one of them, and Sagamon nearly voted for him. So the other two were like, "No way." So that's what I mean about this movie. I think the more I watch it, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't date. It's just the comedy's so good, and I love actually the start with the misdirection of when you see the actual Actor 1 flying down the road, and it's the old car, and it's like falling apart, and when they go into the party, and it's that actress again we're talking about. She's in Lethal Weapon, and she's in The Goonies.
Yeah,
she's the mum,
Richard Donner's wife. Yeah.
And she turned around, and they're like, "What size are they?" And she says, "About 4 foot." And they're like, and they look at, you see Ray and Winston look at each other, and when they walk in, it's a load of kids. You know what I mean? And then you hear one of the kids going, "I thought it was going to be He-Man."
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up to you. The amount of kids that said something about that with being He-Man. Did people love He-Man that much back in 1989?
Yes.
They did?
Yeah, everybody loved He-Man. The cartoon He-Man in the 80s was so big, John. It was massive, and people had the action figures and all. I think you could even get like sweets, jelly sweets, but were like He-Man sweets. Yeah, it was really big in the 80s.
Okay, see, that always stuck out to me because I'm always like, cause I've had zero connection through my entire life to He-Man. So that's like, that one, I always thought, wow, like, why do people like He-Man that much in this movie? Did they have a licensing thing with He-Man? It seems strange.
Yeah, they were massive. And like, even when I was watching this movie with my daughter, when they walked in and the kids all went and started chanting He-Man, I had to tell her, I had to say, "Oh, that was a really big cartoon back in the day." But yeah, the jokes are absolutely brilliant in this movie. And one of my favorite jokes in the movie as well, I just laugh every time. And it's actually a deleted scene. It's in the montage. It's the first montage after they catch the ghost in the courthouse, and you see the Actor 1A. It's called Actor 1A, and it's flying around New York. And there's a scene where you see them flying around the corner, and Peter, Egon are in the back, and they're yes. And you see kind of like you see like Peter kind of looking over his shoulder at Ray, who's driving, and he's like, and you see him looking at Egon, and he's like. So I always laugh at that. In my mind, I just imagine that Ray is just so fixated on getting these ghosts that he just wants to get there as soon as possible. He's like, just get there and we'll get these ghosts. But apparently that's part of a deleted scene. Yeah, it's this whole subplot that, do you remember when Ray gets up and he's checking the painting of Vigo, the Carpathian, and you see him staring into his eyes where Peter's taking the photographs and he's like, "Give me angry, go on, give me angry." And you see Ray, it's so funny, and you see Ray just kind of going,
Yeah.
and then afterwards, Winston says to him, "Ray, you okay?" And Ray's like, "Me? All right." But so the whole thing is that Vigo is possessing him as well. And there was a deleted scene where Ray becomes possessed earlier in the picture, but I don't know if it was ever filmed. It might be in the novelization. I've got the novelization, haven't had time to read it, but that's why at the end of the movie, he then becomes possessed by Vigo the Carpathian.
Yeah, actually, I was reading about this right before we started. So they filmed a lot of other stuff that they ended up cut. It tested bad, this movie. So they actually had to reshoot some stuff. So some stuff got cut, and then they reshot a lot of stuff, including the scene, which I really like, is when the pictures start going up in flames randomly around them.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So that was added in, and they also added in all the dialogue because people were confused as to why the slime was under the city was connected to the painting. Like, people weren't understanding the connections between them.
Ah, right, okay.
And actually, when you watch it the first time, you can it is very loosely connected. You could definitely see where, like, there probably was holes in the plot of the movie for that. And because I was confused, like, at the beginning, like, I'm like, are these two arcs connected, or are they two separate things going on? But then they eventually do come together.
Yeah, because Vigo talks about doesn't he talk about the River of Slime in one of his speeches or something, doesn't he?
Yeah, which, by the way, that's a genius idea, putting the villain in the painting like that. I love that idea.
What do you think of Vigo the Carpathian as a villain?
I like him. I think he's great. I honestly, I think he's an awesome, and Max von Sydow did the voice to that guy, and
yeah.
And the guy who actually did it on set, they didn't tell him that they were going to replace him, and he walked out of the screening.
That's right. He had a David Prowse moment.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? That's how you find out at the screening.
Yeah, and I actually watched a documentary about him a few years ago. I think it's on YouTube. And I know we had mentioned before we started recording about their special features on the Blu-ray. And Evan Reitman briefly mentions him. Says he thinks he was arrested. I think he was actually a professional boxer in like Sweden or somewhere like that, or Norway. He was like a local celebrity. For a few years, and then he became like a recluse. But I agree with you. I really like Vigo in this movie more than Gozer in the first movie. In a lot of ways, he's a lot more memorable. And I actually love the back and forth between him and Janosch as well.
Yeah.
Where he's like, "Command me, Lord, command me." But at the end, when he says to Dana on New Year's Eve, he's like, I can't remember how long it is, but he says something like, "In an hour, the world will be ours and Vigo's." And he says, "Well, mainly Vigo's." Mainly Vigo's.
Yeah. He's great, honestly. And apparently he made that accent up himself, that guy.
Yeah, it's Peter Venkman says to him, "Johnny, where are you from anyway?" And he says, "The Upper West Side."
Upper West Side?
He says, "The Upper West Side." But yeah, I heard in recent times he got a wee bit of criticism from making that voice up. But I don't know, I thought it was funny.
I thought it was funny, too. I mean, you had to do something to stand out. If you didn't do that, he would have been just completely compared to Rick Moranis in the first one. But I think that's why Vigo is more memorable, is because Rick Moranis did a lot of the heavy lifting for the villains in the first one. He was just so funny.
Wait for the sign, and all prisoners will be released. You will perish in flames! You will not be I
suppose so. I mean, that's a fair point. And like when you think about it, you didn't see Gozer. You seen a lot of ghosts throughout the first movie, maybe being controlled by whatever was going to happen later on at the climax. But yeah, you're right. You don't really see Gozer until the end of the movie. And yeah, she's only on screen for a couple of minutes, and she is memorable from that point of view. But I just think Vigo is a wee bit looming over this movie, the whole movie, and he's more imposing that way. But yeah, even at the end where Yama says, "Why am I dripping with goo?"
Speaking of the goo,
dripping with goo.
What do you think of the slime in this movie? The 80s had a weird obsession with pink goo between this movie and The Blob, which I think came out the year before. What is it about green slime coming to life and being a villain in 1980s movies?
Again, I don't know. I didn't think too much about it. I think that it's very over the top in the second movie, very much so. When I watched the special features on the Blu-ray, Dan Aykroyd made a point of saying that yes, we would go over the top with Slave in this one because we did see it in the first one, but go over the top of this one. And I think part of going over the top is making that like a bright pink rather than maybe I suppose like if it was a really bright green, it would be too sickening.
Yeah, that's true. Everyone would like compare it to like Vomit or something like that, or Slimer, like because like Slimer's a big villain
Slimer.
from and they did pop him in there a couple times too, which I thought was pretty funny.
Well, the thing about Slimer in this one too as well, John. When I remember when I watched Ghostbusters when I was a kid, Slimer scared me. He didn't actually have his name in the first Ghostbusters wasn't Slimer. His name was Onionhead.
That's true. They did
Because
change it once you got the
it's
cartoon, right?
the cartoon was the cartoon. He was called Slimer in the cartoon, and he was friends with the Ghostbusters. If you've ever seen the cartoon, and he lived in the firehouse with them, so he was like like a pet. So they brought him back to this one here, where he was. It's like a cameo more, but he's more friendly in it.
Yeah, I thought that was strange. He just seemed like a friendly ghost, almost like he'd fit in more in the world of Casper. Not that he was in the first one; he was more of an annoyance than anything. He was just really going around being a menace. He wasn't trying to hurt anybody.
Yeah, exactly. But this one, he's driving the bus.
I thought that was he had the hat on too, which is hysterical.
Did he have the hat on? Did he notice the hat? I just noticed Rick Moranis going, oh, "It's you." Okay, but I hope you got your license.
Yeah, that was a great one line. I didn't know you had your license.
Yeah. So, but it was it's still funny. Like, and what did you think of the music in this one? I know you always ask me about what I think about the score. What did you think about the score?
I actually really like the score. It's not as memorable as the first one. Like there's a big piece of the score in the first one that always sticks out in my head. That actually it's very haunting, and it's when the ghosts are first coming out, like when they let the ghosts all go, and there's like this little bit of score in the middle there before the license track kicks in. I love that. But in this movie, there's a lot of that actually. But I thought it worked really well. Fitted a little bit more lighter tone, and then the license track this time being from Bobby Brown really worked too. I actually really like that song.
I started reading a thing about a book in there called Ghostbusters: A Visual History, and I started reading about the first movie, and I never got around to reading about the second movie. And they said that the first movie was actually shot like a horror movie. So the whole feeling, the tone and the feel of dread in the first movie is because of that. They shot it like a horror movie, even though it was a comedy. You feel that, and I think the music accompanies that 100% with the first movie. It is more of a horror score, whereas the music in this, and I've been thinking about this because I do like the score in this movie, but I've been thinking about it this week because I knew we were going to do the pod, and I've been listening to the soundtrack a wee bit. To me, it sounds like a superhero soundtrack.
You're right, actually, and that will lean right into like what we were kind of saying, how they were a little bit more becoming heroes ever since the first movie because of the show. So it's like they probably wanted them to be the heroes of this movie, and because it does. And is it the same composer from the first movie?
It's not. Now this composer is a guy called Randy Elderman. He done the score to The Mask. And if you listen to it, it sounds very similar to The Mask at certain parts. But I love The Mask score, and I think The Mask is a far better score when you make that connection of superheroes. So I feel as if they were making the Ghostbusters out in this as if they were kind of superheroes. I suppose maybe they were our superheroes in the 80s.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were definitely. I mean, people still love from the kids of the '80s. Still love the Ghostbusters. I know so many people who still cherish the Ghostbusters. I know you're a big fan. Matt's a huge fan.
Yes.
My sister-in-law Carmela loves she has that painting from this movie on her wall. Actually,
Class.
Yeah, so
really good. Put it up in the baby's room.
Yeah, exactly. That's where it belongs. So, so the Ghostbusters are, I feel like, one of the cornerstones, like the logo in general. I feel like that and the Jurassic Park logo and the Batman logo are like 2-3 logos from film that people just can pull out of a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And like they really crossed over really hard. It's weird because for a franchise like this, to have only 4 movies and a TV show, you would think it'd be more in the amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely a big cult following, I would say. And funny you say about the logo, it's one thing I don't like about this movie either, is I liked it on the poster with the 2, as it's supposed to be a peace sign in the movie, but they've got that logo on their arms, and I just didn't like that logo compared to the first movie. The Acto 1A as well, it looks as if the 1A was the way they wanted to do the original Acto. but they didn't have the money. The whole idea was that it was overloaded with stuff, you know. But one thing I noticed the other night watching it for the first time is, I know it's a minor detail and it's just it doesn't really mean anything, but a lot of the lights on the Acto 1 were blue, whereas a lot of the lights on the Acto 1A are like green and orange.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I definitely prefer the original Ecto as well. And like you were mentioning with the logo, I like the logo being on the cover of things. I don't like it being in the world as well. I know what they were going for, but
Yeah.
it's just, that's a strange decision. Why would you change your logo? Like, as a company, you wouldn't do that. You would just keep the regular logo.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, and like you say, like, it's all right. The Jurassic Park logo is in the movie, but that's on the poster. That's fine. Same with Batman's logo, even though the logo for the original Batman, it's different on his emblem than it is on the poster. But though, you know, it's generally the same. Batman Returns and stuff like that. And the original Ghostbusters, the logo is the exact same. So I agree with you. They could have had it on the poster, but just had the normal logo in the movie. That's another wee annoyance, which I don't like about this sequel. But you were saying about the following it has. It's definitely as a cult following, but I think the cartoon probably had a lot to do with that in the 80s as well. So it wasn't just the movie. I think the cartoon maybe was one of the things that propelled it for children.
Did you guys in Ireland have the Ecto coolers from High C?
I think so. I think I remember them. Yeah.
Because they just came back here a couple years ago, and people were buying them off shelves when they came back, because those were huge, you know, the green colored High Cs from the Ecto coolers. So yeah, you're probably right. I guess that probably just helped kids of the 80s and 90s like learn about the Ghostbusters, and that's why they all love them so much now. And I guess maybe that's why they came back with like Afterlife and whatever. I can, what's the name of the new one? Something Frozen?
Frozen Empire.
Frozen Empire, which I don't know how I feel. That trailer has not impressed me at all. I don't know how I feel about them going back to New York City. I don't know. We'll see.
Look, I think it's one of them films that it always, even though I said earlier that you gonna contradict myself, like I always do. It's one of those movies that New York is a character in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, in the first two movies, to me, Ghostbusters is New York. I feel as if that going back to New York is a good thing, even though I said earlier, like if you wanted to do a spin-off, if you wanted to make movies where you couldn't get Dan Aykroyd in there, or you couldn't get Ernie Hudson or Bill Murray, you could do a story in London. Imagine a ghost story in London with Ghostbusters. It'd be amazing. London's such a an iconic city. Imagine even, and if you wanted to, you could set one in Ireland and have it maybe somewhere rural where the Ghostbusters have to fly in and help to deal with the ghost problem, because they don't have Ghostbusters, say, in Ireland, right? Yeah, those are the stories that you could do. But to me, New York is a character in this movie. That's what I love about it. That shot at the end of the movie where you see the camera panning up and you see the Statue of Liberty and Manhattan and Bobby Brown's on our own plane. Would you mention Bobby Brown just a few minutes ago, John? That's probably my favourite Ghostbusters song. The original soundtrack is amazing. Ghostbusters, and that's another thing too. We were talking earlier about why was it so popular. It also first Ghostbusters came out in the era where movies were having like full album soundtracks produced and released at the time. But Ghostbusters is one of those mega hits from the 80s that people always associate with that movie. They'll always associate with the 80s, and I think that also helped the movie as well. But that first soundtrack, you also had Saving the Day, and you had a few other really good songs on it. But Bobby Brown's song for me in this movie might date it a bit. It's very late 80s, early 90s, but I really love that song. And when you see that camera pan up and you see Manhattan and Statue of Liberty, it's absolutely amazing looking.
It is fantastic, and I agree. It's definitely the best song. And from what I was reading, he wanted to do the song for the movie, but he also said I think he was going to waive some fees if he was able to get that cameo that he gets in the movie. And I'm glad that they gave him a small cameo, because you could just tell right away it's Bobby Brown, so it would have like kind of took you out of it if he was in something bigger.
Oh, Ghostbusters!
How you doing?
Hey guys, come right this way. Hey, you guys got another one of those proton packs? My kid brother really wants one.
The proton pack is not a toy.
He's like the doorman, and he's the one that asks, hey, my kid brother wants one of those proton packs, and he goes and says, a proton pack isn't for kids, which annoys me. And then Afterlife, all the kids have one.
Now everyone's got a proton pack.
Yeah, anybody can have it. It's like Oprah, you get a proton pack. You get a proton pack. You get a proton pack. You know, but it's funny you should say as well about, we were talking earlier, you were asking me about, you know, or you mentioned about it's such an iconic franchise for not being a massive franchise for a long time, especially. You know, we're going to get another movie. We had a movie couple of years ago. We had one in 2016. But I remember like my friends having like the figures and having I don't know if you remember these, maybe a bit young for it, but there was like plastic blue proton packs that kids could get. And I remember like some of my mates having them and being so envious and really wanting these proton packs, you know what I mean, and pretending and playing Ghostbusters. So I think people of my age and stuff, that's where a lot of our love for this franchise comes from.
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't really have too much. I had Ghostbusters action figures, but I never had, like, the proton packs. But Matt was a huge Ghostbusters guy. He still is. It's still one of his favorite, like, franchises. He has Ghostbusters stuff everywhere. He has an Ecto 1, like, the actual, it's huge. A huge car, like, that he has on display in his,
class.
So he's a big-time Ghostbusters fan. I was just always a big fan of the first Ghostbusters. The second one I would always watch every like few years. Like actually, I've watched it like 3 times over the last 5 years, so I've kind of gone back to it a little bit more recently. I was always just a really big fan of the original, and really for me, what originally turned me on was I love the cast. I just think the cast of these movies, especially the first 2 movies, are perfect. Like even Sigourney Weaver, just getting her in there, she's perfect. Like especially since it must have been weird for people who only knew her from the Alien movies to see her play this, you know, almost damsel in distress at points. And then Rick Moranis in the late 80s at the height of his powers. I mean, the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movies, you know, a little bit before Little Giants. But for kids of the 80s and 90s, you knew who Rick Moranis was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and you said about Sigourney Weaver. She's a proper actress. She's brilliant. She keeps it real. She doesn't need to be on screen to try and outshine anybody. She knew what the road was, and she was quite happy to go along with it. And I think a lot of that is down to the fact that she was working with them guys. You know, she respected them as comedians. You know, she's a serious actress, but she respected them as comedians. And fair play to her, you know what I mean, for doing that. I think she'd been nominated for an Oscar a couple of years earlier for Aliens, you know, and her role in that, and how great she'd done in that. She went from not a damsel in distress in Alien because she became the hero in that, but she became even more of a hero in Aliens. Yeah, I mean, it's the characters that make it as well. You know, it's like I say, I go back to the comedy, how they play off each other, their comic timing. You know, even a bit at the start where they're in checking out the baby's room, and she says, "I'm sorry about the mess of the room." And Egon said, "I was not allowed toys when I was a kid." And Ray says, "You didn't even have a slinky," and he says, "I had half a slinky, but I straightened it." and then when Peter comes in and he says, "Nothing in here," or Egon says, "There's nothing in here." He says, "I would like to test or do some gynecological tests on the mother," and he says, "Who wouldn't?" Let's check it. Let's check straight.
Yeah, and they even hint. I mean, that there's always been some kind of dark, like hidden sexual jokes in the both movies. Obviously, the famous ones with the ghost and pulling down the android's zipper in the first one, but in this one, they kind of hint at that Egon got it on with the slime at one point.
Yeah, well, in the first one there is that as well, where Sigourney Weaver says to Bill Murray, "I want you inside me," and he says, "I think it's a bit crowded in there. There's already 2 people in there already." So, yeah, when the slime, you aren't sleeping with it, are you, Ray?
You're not sleeping with it, are you, Ray? Oh, you. It's always the quiet ones. You hound.
Yeah, it works. I mean, the comedy definitely does work in that. And then of course when they like first light up the proton packs, and then everyone they're like, "Do Ray Egon."
Egon, yeah, that's very funny. And when they go down, I love as well that scene too. I wanted to go back to as well. Sorry, I was trying to think of there. You're saying about the trailer to Frozen Empire. I mean, I wasn't too impressed by the Frozen Empire trailer. Listen, it could be an amazing film. I don't know if I'll watch it. If my daughter wants to go and see it, I may bring her, because I promised her I'd bring her to see it. The thing that gets me as well is that when I watched it, they seem to be going away from actual proper ghosts, and that's what I like to see. I mean, I have no problem for it building up to this big set piece or this big villain, but I mean, for at least half an hour, 45 minutes of a Ghostbusters movie, I want to see them get into old buildings, you know what I mean, dark places, dusty places full of cobwebs, you know, I mean, scary places, and taking out a few ghosts and just putting them in a trap and putting them in the containment unit. You know, I just want to see them, I mean, buzzing down the road in their Acto 1 and going into somebody's house and catching a ghost and getting paid and saying, "Thanks very much. If you have any more problems, give us a call." You know, that's what I want to see, at least throughout a movie. It doesn't have to be one big threatening set piece from the first part of the movie to the end, taking over the world. And that's one thing I do appreciate about the second movie, because you do actually see them just catching regular, everyday ghosts. You know, the ghost running through the park. Remember the running ghost? And they catch him. And then there's when they go down into the subway and the ghost train. That's brilliant, so it is.
One of my favorite scenes in the movie is the ghost train. I love that. I think that's a great effect. I love that effect of and how Winston just sitting there the whole time screaming.
It's just like, they both jump off to the sides.
Yeah.
And you see you go and come back and go, that's the old train that crashed here in 1908. Did you get its number? And he's like,
Sorry, I missed it.
even before that, where it kind of foreshadows something bad's gonna happen, and because they're talking about the rats, and Winston doesn't like rats, he's like, no, don't be talking about the rats. But then they start shouting, and they hear the echo, and when Winston shouts, there's no echo, and then you hear the voice, Winston. Just the subtle build-up, nothing really to do with Vigo or anything to do with the main plot. They put that in there for cheap scores. The facts were brilliant. It's a very funny moment as well, memorable moment. And all Egon says is, "We're getting close. Something's trying to stop us." You know, it's brilliant.
No, it is perfect. And actually, one thing you said before that you want to see in a Ghostbusters movie, and just to bring up what you were saying, them going to London. How have they not gone to any European country? You know, with the amount of castles and everything out there, you would think like it writes itself almost to investigate. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying earlier, John, about some of these franchises. I just don't understand how hard it is. I mean, I'm sure there's smarter people and more imaginative people than me that could write these stories. All you got to do is have an idea, like you say, a haunted. You could make a Ghostbusters movie just based about a haunted castle in some European country, even like, you know, Romania or something like that, Scotland, the Highlands of Scotland. You know what I mean? Why not? I mean, and that's not going to be expensive to make.
No. Make it exactly. Have like some like rich billionaire hire them to go to Scotland. They're like they heard something about this castle that needs to get cleared out. Nobody else can do it. You know, we heard you're the best. Why don't you come along? We'll pay top dollar. They can't turn down the money. They come in, clear it out, and you got yourself a movie. Like it writes itself. It's simple. It seems like.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what we talked about last week about when we were doing Lethal Weapon. Growing up, like watching Ghostbusters, when you're a child, it's kind of like, you know, the ghosts kind of scare you a bit, and you know, and then you get older, you get to become a teenager, and you start getting a lot of the comedy, and then you realize it's about, as you said earlier, it's about the characters. It's not about Vigo. It's not about Gozer. Like some of the lines of dialogue in these movies and the stuff they make up is absolutely ridiculous. But it's like we talked about in one of our previous pods. It's the MacGuffin. You know, we care about the guys. We don't care about anything else. Like me and my wee brother used to laugh all the time about the library scene, the books. You know, symmetrical books stacking. We haven't seen this since 1908. It's like, what does that mean? About a lot of crap. Do you know what I mean? But it's funny, and it doesn't matter. But it's funny, and Back to the Future is a lot like that too. With the what do you call it? The flux capacitor and and all this.
Gigawatts.
1.21 gigawatts. What the hell is a gigawatt? You know, it doesn't matter. They're all MacGuffins. It's not about that. It's about Marty. It's about his parents. It's about Doc.
It's how Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis deliver those lines, and like the energy and enthusiasm they have for saying those things, like with the book stacking. That's what makes you get involved, and how they're just so interested, and then having Bill Murray like just blow them off. Like,
you're right. No human being would stack books like this.
You guys are ridiculous. He's just out there trying to get laid.
Yeah, exactly. He's doing it for the chicks. And as you say, Ray is just a big child at heart. He's so enthusiastic about everything. Like I don't really want to talk too much about the first one because I feel it's one we're going to do at some stage. But it's kind of like 100%. But his first scene where he walks in, when Peter's trying to con the two guys and trying to get with a girl, his first day when he walks in, Ray's like, "This is it. This is definitely it." It's like he's excited about everything. And then whereas Egon is a wee bit more deadpan, he's very dry type of humor. He says everything's serious, even the ridiculous stuff he says seriously. And that's what's brilliant about his character. And then of course you've got Ernie Hudson, which everybody well knows. He's the audience. Ernie Hudson's the audience. Ernie Hudson's the everyman. He's the guy who joins the Ghostbusters and sees how ridiculous this all is, but it goes along with it anyway because, as if it's a steady paycheck in it, I believe anything you tell me.
Yeah, well, that's what we were just saying about essentially early in the pod about how this is just another form of like city work. This guy needs a job. The Ghostbusters are hiring. Like, some people have to go work in sanitation. It's not the best work, but someone's got to do that job. So he's like, hey, you guys giving me a paycheck? I'll do whatever the hell you want to do. Of course, then he gets roped in and he's like, all right, this is a little bit out of my league.
Yeah. Like he says in the first movie, where he says to the mayor,
I have seen shit that'll turn you white.
do you know what I mean? It's just, he says it with a dead serious face on him. You know what I mean? Because he was like, I was like, when he goes to the job interview, he's like, Janine's like, do you believe in this? And he's like, if there's a paycheck, yeah, I believe anything you tell me. But later on, he's saying, I didn't believe any of this. But I've been with these guys a few weeks and I've seen stuff. Jesus, So, yeah, it's brilliant that way. Actually, Janine, that's just something I want to touch on Janine as well, John. It's just crossed my mind about Janine.
Annie Potts, we didn't bring her up at all yet.
Annie Potts, what a beautiful looking woman.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, absolutely, especially in this one, such a lovely looking woman. But the thing is that talking about the cartoon, if you notice in the first movie she had the shorter hair, they actually stayed her hair in the second one and give her glasses so she would look more like Janine in the cartoon. And it only dawned on me the other day, a couple of Christmases ago, Santa brought my daughter the Ghostbusters Playmobil Ghostbusters playset. All the characters are based on the first movie, apart from Janine. It looks like Janine from the second movie. So it's all the tie into the cartoon.
It's funny because that always stood out to me so much because like in the scene where her and Rick Moranis are kissing and then Sigourney Weaver comes home and he gets all up, he's all flustered, and then she gets up and I'm looking at her and she's like, man, her hair is so bright right now. I never realized how bright her hair was, and then the big cartoonish glasses. She's very different.
Yeah.
But she plays the character exactly the same. Like she's just throwing shade at all these guys the entire time. Just basically just sarcastic. I love it. She's great in these movies.
She's brilliant, and I love when her and Rick Moranis. The only thing is, it's again this, and I still love this movie. It's just so unlikely that him and her would get together. In the first movie,
never.
I would have preferred to see her with
Ernie.
With Egon, because she seemed to have a crush. No, in the first movie she seems to have a crush on Egon.
You're right, she did. I always pictured her like with Ernie. I don't know why, but you're right. In the first movie, her and Egon did have like a kind of like a little bit of a. They were hinting at things.
Had a bit of a thing going on in the first one, but I love when she says to Rick Moranis in the second one, she says, so do you have a roommate? And he says, no, I used to have a... No, she says, do you live alone? And he says, I used to have a roommate, but my mum moved to Florida. It's so good. It's just so good. And speaking of bright colours, for years I was like, at the end on the Statue of Liberty, I just wanted to point this out. There's an American flag and there's a flag beside it. And maybe it was my DVD copy, but for years I thought it was the French flag. And I looked at it 3 times the other night when I was watching this movie, and I was like, it's definitely a tricolour. It's definitely an Irish tricolour.
Oh.
Did you notice that?
I assumed it was a French flag too, mainly because Statue of Liberty came from France, and I love that Bill Murray likes to point that out. She is French, she's not wearing anything under there. She is French, But yeah, I guess that would make sense because the Statue of Liberty, like Ellis Island, I would have to say, as far as immigrants going there and seeing the Statue of Liberty, it was mostly Irish and Italian immigrants that went through Ellis Island for the most part.
Yeah, unless there's something wrong with the colour. But I looked at it because for years I was like, it's a French flag. But I looked at it and was like, no, it looks like green, white, and orange. I was like, is that Irish tricolour beside the American flag? It's the only 2 flags that are there, and I'm like, why would they have an Irish tricolour there?
Well, I'm not too sure when the Statue of Liberty came here, but I definitely feel like it was during the time when a lot of Irish immigrants were coming to the United States, because that's how my family on my Irish side came here, was through Ellis Island. And the Statue of Liberty, so it would make sense if like they're paying homage or at least honoring those people who went through Ellis Island.
I would love to get a proper clear for just for me own knowledge. Just is it or is it not? Is it Italian flag or is it a French? But it definitely looked like green, white, and orange. Like just was the camera pans up, you see it, and it was just like looks like an Irish tricolor.
Yeah, I'm very
So
curious actually now myself what that is. I'm just wondering if like the color's just thrown off. But you know what? It wouldn't be because if the American flag and the French flag are the same exact colors, there would be no issue with that.
exactly,
So there
that's
would be no
true.
issue. It'd have to be a different color for it to look different because there would be no
Yeah,
color. If they adjusted just that one color, it would be adjusted on both.
that's true. Right enough, they didn't think that because it would be the same colors. Right
Hmm.
enough.
Yeah, so if they did just
Yeah,
one color adjustment, everyone that has the same tone would adjust the same way. So there was no
would
way.
change as well.
Yeah, so that is
Yeah.
pretty interesting. I love that the Statue of Liberty walks across the freaking island. Get over there.
Yeah, it's a great set piece. I really, really like that set piece. And again, even though I love that set piece in this movie, again, it's kind of like um, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man walking through the city and
Oh,
crushing things. Do you remember? It stands in the
yeah.
car, and Peter Venkman says, "Sorry about that," but it looks so good. It's an iconic image. I do like that scene when they turn up at the museum and it's covered in the pink slime. And Egon kind of says, "We need something," and you see him kind of looking, and then you see Peter kind of going, "What's he looking at?" And then everybody's going, looking down, and he's like, "We need a symbol," and it shows you the Statue of Liberty, which is it's pretty cool. But I don't know if I liked it with the slime guns.
Yeah, it definitely was them trying to combine all the same stuff at that one time. I didn't think it was necessary either. I know what they were going for. That's also, to go full circle on this pod, that's New Year's Eve. Everyone's got the New Year's stuff going on at that exact time. Because that's when that whole scene kicks in, is with that and the Bobby Brown song and it being New Year's Eve leading up to midnight.
I mean, it's that for me. It's just an enjoyable movie. I think we can all sit here and think, it should have went this way, should have went that way. For me, as a sequel, it wasn't a disaster. I agree with you. It's not even in the same league as the original. The original is, to me, one of the greatest '80s movies ever made. One of the best comedies ever made. But this one here is it's very enjoyable. It's serviceable, as when Dan Aykroyd said on the Blu-ray. It's a serviceable. It's a good companion piece to the first movie. It doesn't do anything to damage the original.
No, I agree. It got critically panned at the time, but just like any movie following up one of the greatest movies ever, it's impossible to fill those shoes. They at least tried some different stuff. They did tread most of the same ground, but nothing in this movie is offensively bad. Nothing in this movie is even bad. It's just a really good comedy. Like if you want to watch a good comedy movie, I've seen way worse sequels than Ghostbusters 2. You'll have a great time
Yep.
with this one, that's for sure.
Exactly, John, and I totally agree with you. And I think that it had, because as I said earlier, it does hold up, and the effects hold up, and the comedy works for me. The comedy works. I mean, it's not like it's not funny. So I think that's why it's kind of endured. As a sequel. As a comedy sequel to Ghostbusters. And especially that summer as well, as we said at the very start of the pod, it was up against some real stiff competition. So it may not have done as well as maybe the original at the box office, I'm not sure, but I think it still was financially successful, and it was up against some really big hitters in the summer of 1989.
I actually want to double check this, but I know it was originally stated to come out the same day as Batman '89. I don't know if it ended up coming out the same day or not, but let me double check that because I'm very curious, because that would be crazy. Came out on June 16th, 1989, and Batman 1989 came out on, because if it had to go up against Batman, it got screwed over.
That would be very silly to do that, especially the hype it was around Batman. But if you've scheduled in a release date already, maybe they didn't realize.
So Batman came out on June 23rd, 1 week later.
23rd, 1 week later. So they tried to get in just before Batman. But I think that I was thinking about this as well, taking Batman out of the equation. That summer of sequels, if you take in Last Crusade, Back to the Future 2, what have I got? Lethal Weapon 2. Would I put this above Lethal Weapon 2? I don't know. I think Ghostbusters may be my lead. I may put it above Lethal Weapon 2. I'm not sure. But it definitely would be below Back to the Future 2 and Last Crusade for me.
Oh, wow. See, if I was going to rank these two, it would probably go, or 4 movies, it would go Lethal Weapon 2 would probably be number 1. Actually, no. It would go Last Crusade, Lethal Weapon 2, Ghostbusters 2, and then it would be last place Back to the Future 2.
Really?
Yeah, I think, honestly, out of the trilogy of Back to the Future movies, 2 is my least favorite, surprisingly.
When I was younger, Part two was my favorite for a long while, but then as you start to get a wee bit older, you realize that the first movie is the best. Two was my second favorite, but now in recent years, I like Back to the Future 3 more than Back to the Future 2. However, it's my favorite trilogy, and I absolutely love Back to the Future 2. So I think for out of them sequels, Back to the Future 2 would be my favorite for that decade. Or sorry, that year.
I get that, and I like the problem with Back to the Future, just like a lot of friends, Back to the Future is just one of the best films ever made. I think that movie's like a masterpiece. It's no flaws in that. When you get down, Back to the Future 2 is, I has iconic moments. I think that's what people remember a lot about Back to the Future is like the shoes, the hoverboard, the clothes,
Yes.
what they thought the Jaws coming out of the movie theater, and like how they
Hologram.
Yeah, the hologram and how they predicted all those sequels. Like, people remember that stuff, but if you break it down to a story plot standpoint, I don't think it holds up that well. And then when you get to Back to the Future 3, I think that movie kind of ties the whole trilogy together. Is it a little cheesy at the end? Yeah, but I'm not going to lie. I still kind of like that.
Yeah, well, it wraps it up in a nice bow.
Yeah.
I think the thing is with Back to the Future 2, I know I'm a wee bit older than you, so I think the thing is with Back to the Future 2 for me is that never seen it in the cinema, seen it on VHS in the room when I first came out, is that whole wonder of what is 2015 going to be like. And back then we genuinely thought, we're going to get hoverboards. There's going to be flying cars. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Right?
Yeah.
And then when we got there, it was like, none of that shit was true. So now it's kind of like, oh, well, that wonder of the future is kind of gone, right?
Yeah.
I just think that Back to the Future 3 went back to basics. It's very similar to Back to the Future 1 in a lot of ways. It's more dark story. It's more in line of what Back to the Future 1 was, and I just think it's a well-made movie. Even though it's a Western and there's cheesy parts in it, but I just think it's a well-made movie. It came out like 33 years ago, and it's a really, really well-made movie. But what you were saying about Back to the Future 2, at that particular time, when you think about it, you think about this, John, 1989, you've Last Crusade, you've Lethal Weapon 2, you've Ghostbusters 2, you've Back to the Future 2. Which out of them four movies had the most original story?
Well, that's the thing, is Ghostbusters 2 probably, Back to the Future 2 probably, man, I don't know. I guess Ghostbusters or Back to the Future probably had the more original stories. I mean, Last Crusade is just a rehash of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Lethal Weapon 2, you can argue, is kind of it's kind of just settling in. It's a really cheesy, over-the-top story, but I love Lethal Weapon 2.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. But I actually think that out of them four movies, the Back to the Future 2 had the most original story. They took a lot of risks with that movie, and they paid off. And even I think the original story was it was going to be similar to Back to the Future 1, but it was set in the 60s, right? And then it heavily involved Crispin Glover, his character George McFly. And then what happened was they couldn't get him. So they went back and they rewrote it. And Robert Zemeckis says himself, he says that we realized that we had a unique opportunity to go into the first movie, right? And it had never been done before. So the whole plot of Back to the Future 2, the special effects, like you say, the iconic props, the iconic moments, the cliffhanger at the end, just all that for me just makes it a better overall movie than the other sequels that came out that summer. The problem with Back to the Future 2, which has been well documented, was it was that too busy. It was too fast-paced. You didn't have time to breathe. And that has a lot to do with the production because they filmed Back to the Future 2 and 3 back-to-back. And Robert Zemeckis didn't have the time to go back and kind of, he says, edit it the way he would have liked to.
And I get that. It definitely, that's what it feel it. Because when you watch it, I mean, the set pieces in Back to the Future 2 are amazing. I think the movie visually is great. I love how that movie looks. I love even from the opening time and the opening of the movie when they're just in the DeLorean flying and it's got the rain and the clouds next to them.
Yeah.
It just looks gorgeous. So I mean, it's a great looking movie. I have issues like with how the plot and the story are, but you know what? It is a good counterpart. It's a good middle chapter because it leads right into 3. They all lead right into each other perfectly. That's what makes the trilogy work so well. I just feel like the first Back to the Future cast this huge blanket over the 2 sequels because they were filmed back to back together. You kind of replace actors in the sequels as well, so you have to have actors and actresses kind of like being hidden for big parts of the movie. That's how we get Elizabeth Shue, but then we end up kind of hiding a lot of her. Crispin Glover leaves, so you got to hide him a lot. And I just feel like that kind of stuff hurts it a little bit just in comparison to the first one. But
Yeah.
not many movies get compared to the first movie.
Yeah, look, I can't disagree with you there. Look, the first movie is, like you say, it's in my top 5 movies of all time, maybe top 10 movies of all time. Absolutely adore Back to the Future, and it is one of those movies that if it never had a sequel, it would be just fine. It would be still well remembered. You could argue the sequel's cheapened the original.
Damn! I'm late for school.
I do feel as if the sequels possibly became a wee bit more cartoonish than what the original intended. When you create a movie as successful as Back to the Future, the chances of making a successful sequel or trilogy out of that is very slim, and I feel as if they've done it. They've done it in spades. It's just a trilogy that I really love. But listen, what you're saying, John, totally valid.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, listen, I like it, and not many movies can actually have a good 3 movies in their trilogy. Even Star Wars, like, I love the original trilogy of Star Wars, but the first 2 movies are way better, in my opinion, than the third movie that closes out the trilogy. It's very hard to stick the landing. Dark Knight trilogy, Dark Knight Rises, easily the worst of those 3. It's just very hard. Very rarely happens can you ever line up a good 3 set of movies to actually all be good. Usually one of them falters in there.
And the amount of like podcasts I listen to online and people that hate the third one, and I'm just kind of like, look, I respect people's opinions. We all have them. There's movies I love that people hate, and I understand why they hate them. But at the same time, I think that they sometimes they haven't seen certain movies for a long time, and I think that if they go back and revisit Part 3, that they would be pleasantly surprised. I think that it is aged really well. That's what I'm saying, because now that we have the wonder of what's 2015 going to be like, I don't know, it's only a fantasy. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't actually believing in 2015 would have flying cars, but when you're a kid, you might, right? Yeah. But what I mean is that that's the whole message at the end of the third one. The whole message is Doc says to Marty and Jennifer, you know, the future hasn't been written.
The future is not set.
You can make it whatever you want to make it. Just make sure it's a good one, both of you. So I just think that the third one sometimes gets a bad rap, and I actually think it's a well-made movie. And as you say, I think it's a really good movie to finish the trilogy, because you're right about Return of the Jedi. Like, I know people that actually think Return of the Jedi is the best Star Wars movie. For me, it's like Empire Strikes Back. I think Return of the Jedi is nowhere near as good as the first 2, and it's just a final chapter to tie up the loose ends, but there's a lot of problems with that film.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of problems with that film, but, you know, it still does close out the trilogy well enough to where it's like, okay, it's good enough, but in comparison to having 2 of the greatest films of all time before it, you kind of just expect that. I mean, I guess the Lord of the Rings movies kind of closed out their trilogy, because I think Return of the King is the best of the 3 Lord of the Rings movies. So I guess they closed out pretty damn well, but for the most part, they never do. You just gotta. That's why I try and watch movies in a bubble. Like, you know, like, try and enjoy films for what they are, because I try not to let sequels taint originals. You know, because if you do that, then the Terminator franchise would just get completely dragged down.
Yeah, no, listen, Terminator 3 or Salvation, it doesn't take away how genius T2 is. You know what I mean? And how great a film Terminator 1 is. Do you know what I mean? And the thing is with the Lord of the Rings, now I've only seen them movies once or twice, many years ago, and there've been films I've been meaning to go back and revisit, because I didn't love them. I wasn't a big fantasy lover, but you had a trilogy of books to work from, so the ground was set there. Whereas trilogies like Back to the Future, they had no intention of making a trilogy, and to me that's what makes the trilogy so great in the end, because they were able to do it. Same with Star Wars. I'm not sure if George Lucas even had a story in mind for Part 2 and 3. He did say it was supposed to be a 3-film or a trilogy or whatever, but when you look at the evidence, like, for example, Princess Leia kissing Luke, you know, they weren't originally supposed to be brother and sister. I don't even think Darth Vader was originally supposed to be his dad, so that was changed through rewrites for the sequels, and you know what I mean. So changes happened.
Kind of hard to believe George Lucas on some of that stuff. He says he had it all planned out, but if you plan that out with Leia, then you made some mistakes in there that you should probably
some
think
weird
about.
Some weird choices if he did have it planned out from the start. Really did.
But speaking of the Lord of the Rings, though, I'm just like you. I'm not a big fantasy guy, and I watched the Lord of the Rings like when they first came out in the early 2000s. I did not love them. I revisited them last year to watch the 4Ks to review for the channel. I watched the extended cuts. They're amazing movies. I was dead wrong about them. They are fantastic. The only thing is these extended cuts are about 4 hours each. I had to watch them over. It took me a week.
Yeah, I've never even watched the extended versions of them. I have the DVDs from back in the early 2000s, and I've been like, because I wouldn't mind upgrading, but I'm just kind of like, look, I need to go back and make sure that I actually might like them.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
would do
Before
that
spending all that money.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even I was going to say, even the Godfather trilogy. People talk about the Godfather trilogy. I mean, even Francis Ford Coppola knew himself. He was like, the third movie wasn't supposed to be the third movie in a trilogy.
No,
And when you look at Godfather Part 1 and 2, I needed money, but
Yeah.
from even from an artistic point of view, he was trying to tell the studio, no, this is supposed to be an epilogue. It was originally called The Death of Michael Corleone, and they were going to write it all about his demise. So you had the first two movies, and then you had this one. But they said no, it had to be Godfather Part 3. It had to be a trilogy. But even a lot of people don't even consider Godfather Part 1 and Part 2 like two movies. A lot of people consider Godfather Part 1 and 2 one movie, because a lot of it's just based on the one book, to do with video and stuff when he was younger, and a lot of the stuff to do with Michael in the 50s was just written for that movie, which I can understand their point of view. But then again, maybe they're just trying to be I don't know, smart, because people don't want to separate the two. People don't want to say, oh well, I think one's better than two.
Well, what's funny is they used to, and it was released on VHS, because I was actually looking up a question for tomorrow's Let's Talk, is that a movie that never came to Blu-ray or 4K is the Godfather saga, they call it, which they play it in chronological order from the time that Vito's a kid to, the very end of Godfather Part 2. They close it out in chronological order and show the whole two films that way, because that's how they originally intended for, I guess, the book. And then, Part 3 was, again, supposed to be the epilogue, which they actually re-released a new cut of it called The Death of Michael Corleone, which I watched, and it's a better version, but 3 still has its problems.
I know what you're talking about, and that version hasn't been released. You're right, I've never seen it. I'd love to see it, and it has the deleted scenes in it as well, so It's just one long saga. But I have to disagree about the Michael Corleone cut of 3. I didn't like it.
No, I thought it was I mean, listen, I don't really like The Godfather 3, just to be honest. It's got its moments, it's got some nice scenes, but I am one of those people that feels like Sofia Coppola is horribly cast in that role. That was supposed to go to Winona Ryder, but she backed out at the last minute. And this isn't a knock against Sofia Coppola. Like, I enjoy all of her movies that she directs, but as an actor, that leaves a lot to be desired.
Look, Part 3 to me has an awful lot of problems. I don't mind it. I like it. I can watch it. When I watch Godfather 1 and 2, every now and again, I'm like, I'll throw 3 on, and I enjoy it from start to finish. When I got the new cut, I was really excited to watch it, but I've only watched it the once. I've actually bought it. I've got the Blu-ray. There were certain choices I didn't agree with. Like at the end, the way he edited it down, which is probably one of the best parts of the movie after his daughter's killed, and it shows him dancing with the 3 women in his life. And they kind of, they cut out his wife and they cut out Apollonia, and it just shows him dancing with his daughter, and it didn't even edit the music properly. The music kind of jumps, and so I can't remember now, John, but I remember there were certain scenes which he cut out of that new cut, which I didn't understand why. My understanding for a director's cut should be that you add scenes in, you know what I mean, or tinker about with them. I understand. I just didn't like the job he done. Look, it's been a while since I've watched that cut, but I remember watching it afterwards going, look, I prefer just watch the original cut.
I mean, maybe I have to watch them back to back, because I don't watch The Godfather 3 like that often, like you, maybe like every once, because I'll watch The Godfather Part 1 and Part 2 every year, but like Part 3 I'll watch that like every maybe 4 or 5 years, just enough time to forget that I don't like the movie, and then I put it in like, oh yeah, that's why I don't like it.
That's like me and Alien 3. Yeah. Every time I watch Alien and Aliens, I'm like, I need more Alien. I'll watch 3. It'll be better this time. I know it'll be better this time when I watch it. And then I put it on and it's not. And I'm like, what the fuck? Why did I watch this? I know it's not good.
Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't know if you like this. You actually do like Nightmare on Elm Street too, actually. I think it was you who told me that. But
yes.
I always forget that I don't like that movie. I'm telling you, like every 3 years I'll put it on, I'll watch the whole thing. I'm like, no, I just don't like that movie.
Yeah. It's like that's like Freddy's Dead for me. I go through a phase of watching the whole series, and I watch up to 5, and then I'm like, fuck it, I may as well round it out with Freddy's dead. And and then I get really excited. I'm like, oh, Freddy's dead. And then I watch it, and at the end, I just go, what a heap of shit. And I do it every time to myself, every time, John.
Yeah, because you're right. You just want more of the characters, and then you forget, like, you're like maybe I'll like it this time. I'm in the zone right now watching all these movies, and then you just leave disappointed again.
Yeah, exactly. I'm actually Freddy's Dead was movie. I'm disgusted by the end because I'm like, how the hell did they go from that to that? It's kind of like Batman and Robin, you know.
Oh
Fuck
my God.
Excuse my language. I had that out if you want. How did they go from Batman '89 to this?
No, it makes no sense. I never will understand. And that is only in 8 years that we ended up with Batman '89 to Batman and Robin. 8 years. That's all it took for us to end up in a cartoon.
Yeah. At least with James Bond, you know, you could go, you know, From Russia with Love. Oh, what was the one? What was the really bad one of Roger Moore's? It's like
Moonraker?
Moonraker. You could go, well, you know, it was about 15, 16 years. I run out of ideas. This is like their 12th movie. You know what I mean? No, they went 4 movies in 8 years. And look at the state of that.
They had to stop making Batman movies. They took 8 years off because of what Batman and Robin did. They had to stop making. They made 4 movies in 8 years. They're like, all right, we'll take 8 years off until Batman Begins and figure out what the hell happened.
Yep, it took them as long to figure out the next one as it did to get them the first one off the ground.
Yeah, because they had to figure
Which
out
shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, they had to figure out what did we do to end up here when we started here.
Yeah, and I'm always, I don't know if you're like me, I'm always looking for new Batman 89 content. I like listening to people's opinions and stuff. And like, I do think that people are starting to come around to how much of a classic 89 is.
Yeah.
Now more than ever, because like there was a way there because of the Nolan trilogy that there was this divide and people were like dissing 89 and all the rest, and I used to do my head in because it's like, what was I listening to? What was the one I was listening to? And they were saying about, what franchise was it? Oh, I can't even remember now, but they were talking about a franchise and they were kind of like, it became really popular and they were kind of like, oh, you know, I feel as if we were the originals. And then when it became really popular, everybody was telling you that you're wrong. And that's how I felt about Batman. Because Batman was kind of like, wasn't as popular now as it was in the 90s. Even though you did have a successful Batman 89 and you had Batman Returns and you had Batman Forever, it still wasn't as popular as Batman is now. And if you loved Batman, you know, you were kind of seen as a bit of a geek and a bit of a kind of, oh, you like Batman? Do you? All right, okay. And that's what I'm saying. So I just feel as if it's became so popular now that for a while there it was kind of bothering me that people would tell me what I should think about Batman, and they probably didn't like Batman until they watched The Dark Knight.
Yeah, it's so weird. I always felt like that. And I would listen to like podcasters like would be like, oh yeah, Batman '89 has aged horribly. You know, it's nothing like what we get nowadays. Like, it was just kind of like, you know, it was just, they let Tim Burton, like, you know, do too much. It was too dark. It was too silly. And I'd be like, what movie are they watching? I love this movie. This movie is a masterpiece in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And now you're right. All of a sudden, I guess just people, like, maybe made people feel more comfortable. I get it. If you watch The Dark Knight and you're into that universe and you watch Tim Burton's universe, one's operating in the real world, one created a world. I get it if you're comparing the two, but they're very different. You shouldn't compare them because honestly, the way people feel about Batman '89 is kind of how I've started to feel about The Dark Knight, where I loved that movie when it came out, but I've cooled on it a lot since then.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose this is maybe a chat for another day, but it's kind of like, I agree with, look, I've always respected Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. Don't like a Dark Knight Rises, think it's rubbish, but I like them. But you're right, see now, like, I have them on Blu-ray there. I can't remember the last time I've watched them. Maybe a few years ago, but I've no desire to watch them anytime soon. I'll pop 89 in before I pop them Nolan ones in again. As a matter of fact, if I was to not pop up Nolan one, it'd probably be Begins.
That's,
you know, I think it's a very good film.
Yeah, Batman Begins is actually my favorite of the Nolan trilogy now. It wasn't always like that, but yeah, that's, I guess like a good origin story. We get 89, we get the origin story of the Joker, and then in Batman Begins, we get the origin story of Batman.
100%. And as I say, maybe it's sometimes I like watching, like, you know, people watching the movies and seeing what they think of them for the first time. And I think maybe there's a generation there now, John, that are actually grew up watching the Nolan trilogy and are going back and watching the Burton ones and are having a newfound appreciation for that. Even with movies like Joker coming out and things like that, I think they're having a newfound appreciation for that movie.
I agree. I think what's happening now is because now we've had so many different iterations of the Batman, Batman versus Superman. We've seen so many different Batmans now. I think people are understanding that they can separate the worlds. Like when Batman Begins first came out, that was really, we had the 60s Batman movie, but that was really only the 5th Batman movie and the first one that was starting a whole new franchise, really. So now people are actually getting used to, like, okay, I might like this Batman, but I could also like this Batman. It doesn't have to be Tim Burton's Batman versus Christopher Nolan's Batman. You could just like them both for different reasons, or you could just, appreciate them at least.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I actually realized myself when I one night popped on Batman Forever and hadn't seen it in a while, and found myself enjoying it. And then I was like, I can enjoy this for what it is. It doesn't taint my liking of 89 or Returns. And then it's the same where if I pop in Begins or The Dark Knight, I'm like, well, it's not going to taint what I think about this. So I can enjoy every single one of these universes that have been created by different artists and different directors, different spins. I've always said it, you know what I mean? It's a character, all the characters, they're characters with 85 years worth of history. There's no one correct version.
No, if anything, we're making out like bandits in the sense that we get to actually get all these different versions of the character we love, and who knows, I don't want to keep seeing the same film over and over again. Like, I have Batman 89. I want to try some new stuff. See what they all don't really work for me. I thought Batman versus Superman was an atrocious movie, but I'm glad at least some people like it.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember for years people saying about Jack Nicholson coming back as the Joker, and I was kind of like, no, he's dead. Don't need to see him come back as the Joker.
If
do you know what I mean?
Back, I would have been offended.
Yeah, it's like, he's fucking dead, right? And that's it. Just don't mind Keaton. Don't mind even that same universe. I mean, I've always had this idea that I would love to see a trilogy with Keaton and Burton and Danny Elfman, but I don't want it to look like 89. I don't want it to look like Returns. Give me another kind of gothic part of Gotham and a different spin on a villain. That would be good.
That would be really good. That was my biggest problem with The Flash, is that we just took Batman from who's always operated in the Tim Burton universe and we plucked him out and we put him into this like Justice League real world universe. I'm like, but that's not where this Batman was. He was in his own world. Now you're taking him and he's fighting aliens. I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. That never made sense for this Batman.
No, definitely not exactly.
It's almost offensively bad. But we went about 45 minutes away from Ghostbusters 2, so I'm going to wrap up this pod real quick. So if you guys enjoyed the show, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on. I want to thank all my producers and channel directors. We really appreciate you. If you want to join those memberships, look for that in the description below. And after you're done doing all that, get out in those streets, tell your friends about it.